Hi, my name is Leah Day, and welcome to Quilt Along number 15 on the Free Motion Quilting Project. This week we're finally finished with stippling. I know you're probably ready to move on with something else, and that's what we're going to do. We're going to start exploring this whole family of free motion quilting designs. And the very first one we're going to play with is called sharp stippling. This design works very similarly to stippling. You'll notice that immediately. But it produces an entirely different texture because you occasionally come to a sharp point. So I hope you enjoy this video and spend some time this week playing with sharp stippling. So let's get started with sharp stippling. The very first step is to wiggle back and forth across your quilting space in a row with some wiggly V shapes. And you can see I'm just curving down, coming to a point, then immediately bouncing off into the other direction, creating a nice little soft curve and another point. You don't want to stay on that point for too long, meaning you don't want to stop your sewing machine and have it just going up and down in the same place. Otherwise you'll create a knot on your quilt. But you can also keep in mind that you can stop. Just simply stop stitching with your needle in the down position at any of those points, and that will give you a place to rest within the design. You can reposition your quilt, do whatever you need to do at any time that you hit one of those points. Just make sure not to stop, meaning stop moving, but continue to run the machine as you stay still, because that will result in a knot or your thread breaking. So now you can see that I'm really just taking that same basic shape and making it a little bit more complex. I'm adding a little bend, I'm adding an extra wiggle, I'm dividing kind of the wiggly flame shape into two smaller pieces, and then on the opposite side I'm making it a little longer. There's really no wrong or right way to do this, and it's important to just simply play with a variety of different shapes and just kind of come up with whatever ones that you like, what you like the sound of, what you like the look of. This is a really interesting design because it produces kind of a flame-like texture for your quilts. And you can see I'm stitching this on a really big scale. This is around about 1-inch scale. Some areas are a little more narrow than that, some areas are a little bit bigger, but it really averages out to about a 1-inch scale. And you can see how this is looking on the surface of the quilt. It's a very different texture from stippling. Those simple sharp points do add a significant amount of difference between those two designs. But notice that we're still moving in the exact same way. We're still wiggling a row from left to right, and then now I'm wiggling back down and creating a row running from right to left. And I'm interlocking those two rows together. I'm not getting them so close that they touch, but I'm just trying to interlock those wiggly flame shapes together so that way the rows come together seamlessly. And you'll notice, I mean, this is going to be something that we learn with every new design that we learn, is just simply how to set up a basic row. You know, well, moving one direction, then moving the opposite direction. Once you get the hang of this, you can stitch this anywhere, and you can stitch this on any size. Of course, stitching it bigger, you're going to need to be careful about moving the quilt too quickly in relation to the speed of your machine. It's really easy when we get comfortable to start moving very fast, swinging the quilt around really quickly, and that's going to result in big giant stitches unless we also put our foot down on the machine pedal and make the machine go fast in accordance with how fast the quilt is moving. You got to keep that balanced ratio so that way the stitches stay roughly the same size and the same shape. So now let's see this design stitched on a slightly smaller scale and in a real quilt. This is about an 8-inch quilt block, and it has already been stitched in the ditch. It was stitched in the ditch a couple years ago, actually. This is a very old UFO quilt that I'm finally getting quilted here for the Quilt Along. And all I'm doing is simply taking that sharp stippling design, wiggling in, coming to a point, wiggling out, and filling in a row, working from left to right, until I get to the edge of the block, and then I'm going to work down and work a row from right to left. And this is on a 1/2-inch scale. It's a 1/2 inch between all of the lines of quilting, and I'm
the row is about 2.5 inches wide, or tall, let's say tall, from the top of that block down to where I'm kind of stopping the row. About as much as I can handle is about 2.5 inches in that range of my hands. So that way I can move without everything getting too unwieldy. And the important thing to realize is it really doesn't matter if you leave spaces too open with this. Notice that I've left a couple pretty big areas, open, and that doesn't matter. It would be far more noticeable if I wiggled and came too close to the stitching. If I tried to fill it and suddenly everything got really tight together, that would be far more noticeable. So I'm just going to kind of leave some gaps, but I'm interlocking that the second row with that first row and trying to make them come together so that it looks like they're just kind of, the texture is continuous, so that there's no real visual barrier between the two. Notice that I stopped right there with my needle in the down position, repositioned my hands a little bit, and then started stitching, and then made that stop be a point to a flame. And that's getting back to what I was saying at the beginning of this video. These sharp points are a very nice difference from regular stippling, because regular stippling was all curves, all soft fluid shapes, and it was hard to stop without it being noticeable, without having some kind of little blip or extra wiggle in there that made it noticeable that you stopped or started. The nice thing about this is that you can stop in those points. Just stop, and then if you don't have the automatic feature, rotate the hand wheel so the needle is in the down position, reposition the quilt, reposition your hands, and then start stitching again. It will become like second nature once you get used to stopping that way and always making sure that the needle is in the down position. Now, of course, this is a real quilt, and I'm sure that you want to see what it looks like all squished up in my machine, because this is right in the very center of the quilt. So I want to show you what I'm doing is rolling up the part of the quilt that I wanted to set in my lap. And a lot of it is tucked through that harp, through the arm of the machine, into the back. But this is the little bit that was left over. I couldn't tuck it to the back. I couldn't get it out of my lap, so I just rolled it up in front of me. Of course, this causes my wrist to come up a little bit, and you can kind of see the angle of my neck is not the best angle in order to be able to see what I'm doing. But I'm going to finish quilting this block, and then I'm going to stop and take a little break. So it's okay to maintain and hold a position, maybe in your body or your neck that's not necessarily comfortable, so long as you don't do it for too long of a time. And so you can see I rustled that whole quilt up, and then I quilted from left to right for about 4 inches, and that's as much as I could do. And then I needed to kind of unroll and unwind all of that and reposition my hands, reposition the quilt, be able to see where I was going, and get started again. I hope that you can see this is a full-size quilt, but it is not very difficult to quilt this. It is not a challenge, so long as you work maybe one block at a time, one area of sashing at a time, and are willing to reposition the quilt whenever you need to. A lot of people will look at how much I turn and rotate a quilt and are confused by that, but really it's down to getting it into the most comfortable situation for whatever area you're quilting. And here's what it looks like whenever you finish sharp stippling in a very bright green block.
So that's it for this week. I really hope that you'll get on your sewing machine and give sharp stippling a try. We're really just playing with it in the most basic way this week. Just stitch it into a block, onto a practice quilt, stitch it in rows, the exact same way we learned regular stippling, just wiggling some rows. Do the exact same thing with sharp stippling and see how this design feels and compares to regular stippling. Make sure to link up your blog post and share your progress with stippling. We reviewed last week all of the lessons and tutorials that we had learned so far. So any questions that you have about the design, make sure that you ask them, so that way as we move on, we're all on the same page. So that's it for this week. I really hope that you've had fun learning sharp stippling. Until next time, let's go quilt.
Get a solid grip on your quilt and be able to move and manipulate it easily on your machine. Invest in Machineger's free motion quilting gloves. Find them at daystyledesigns.com.